Shri Gurave Namaha. Mukam karoti vachalam pangam langayate girim yat kripa tamaham bandi Shri Gurun dinataranam. Vancha kalpataru bhyascha kripa sindhu bhya patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Namo Mahabhadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namni Gaura Trishe Namaha. Nityanandam Namastubhyam Premananda Pradayane Kalau Kalmashanashaya Janava Pataye Namaha. Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam. He Krishna Karna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute. Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jayatam Suruto Pangor Mamamanda Mater Gati Matsarvasva Padambojo Radha Madana Mohano Divyad Vrindaranya Kalpadrumadha Srimad Ratanagar Singhashanasto Srimad Radha Srila Govinda Devo Preshta Libhi Sevyamano Smarami. Shiman Rasarasaram Bhivam Shivata Tatakstitaha Karshana Venu Swanair Gopir Gopinatha Shriyestunaha Brindai Tulsi Depyai Priyai Keshavasya Krishna Bhakti Prade Devi Satya Vachai Namo Namaha Bhaktya Vihina Aparadha Lakshai Kshiptascha Kamadi Taranga Madhye Kripa Maitvam Sharanam Prapanna Vrinde Namaste Charanarvindam. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. First of all, I'm offering my unlimited Dandavat Pranams and my Shraddha Pushpanjali at the lotus feet of my most worshipable beloved Gurudev, Nityalila Pravishta, Om Vishnu Pad, Paramahansa Asto Tarashata, Sri Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta, Swami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada. And then I'm offering my same unlimited Dandavat Pranams and my Shraddha Pushpanjali at the lotus feet of my most worshipable beloved Siksha Gurudevs, Nityalila Pravishta, Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa, Astatarasata Sri Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhara Goswami Maharaj, and Nityalila Pravishta Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Astatarasata Sri Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. and my Dandavat pranams to the lotus feet of all of my Shri Shri Rupanuga Guru Varga, and my Dandavat pranams to all of the Vaishnavas and all of the Vaishnavis. So we are reading the last shloka, shloka 11 of Sri Upadeshamrita. Yesterday we read the commentary of Sri Radharaman Charan Das, or not Charan, Radharaman Das. And we also read Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's, and we read up to a point in Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's commentary, Anuvriti, in which he was actually explaining the verse, and he was explaining, I'll read the verse again so that we can refresh our memory. This verse is pointing out the glories of Sri Radhakunda. Krishna Syochai Pranaya Vasati Preyasi Bhyopi Radha Kundam Chasya Munibir Abitas Tadrig Eva Vyadai Yat Preshtayar Apiyalam Asulabam Kim Punar Bhakti Bhajam Tat Premedam Sakrid Api Sara Snatur Avishkaroti. Translation. After thorough deliberation on the matter, the sages have unanimously declared in the Padma Purana that just as amongst all the gopis, Srimati Radhika is the foremost object of Sri Krishna's great love, in precisely the same way this pond of hers is also the topmost object of his love. Upon one who simply bathes in its waters just once with great devotion, Sri Radhakunda bestows that rare treasure of Gopi Prem, which is so immensely difficult to attain, even for such dear devotees of Bhagavan as Narad. What to speak of ordinary sadhaks. So, each one of the commentaries that we read of Radharaman Das and Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, they explained how Sri Radhakunda alone is the most suitable place of residence for those endeavoring for perfection in their bhajan. This is Bhaktivinoda Thakur telling. The jiva has overcome the influence, the jiva who has overcome the influence of matter, and who has attained his inner perfected spiritual form as a gopi. That means a prakrita gopi deha. That jiva should reside in the mood of a maid servant, a Paliyadasi of Srimati Radhika. Can you move the camera? No, it's easier.
I just moved.
Okay. I'm going to read the sentence again. The jiva who has overcome the influence of matter and who has attained his inner perfected spiritual form as a gopi, a prakrita gopi deha. That jiva should reside in the mood of a maidservant, Paliyadasi, of Srimati Radhika, on the banks of transcendental Sri Radha Kunda, in the divine land of Braja, Aprakrita Braja, in the resplendent grove, Kunja, of the spiritual master, who is situated in his eternal form as a female friend, Guru Rupa Saki, of Sri Radha Krishna. Living there, the pure spirit soul, Aprakrita Jiva, should externally take constant shelter of chanting Harinam. Externally, constant shelter of chanting Harinam. Internally, in his spiritually perfected eternal form as a gopi, he should render service to Srimati Radhika while deeply meditating on Sri Krishna's eightfold daily pastimes, Ashtakalya Leela. This is the culmination of bhajan for the devotees who have taken shelter of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's feet. Beautiful paragraph.
Who's that from?
Bhaktivinoda Thakur. On the 11th verse.
Okay. Sounds just like Gurudev.
Yes, why not? Yes. And that's his, there's only 2 paragraphs in his Piyusha Varshini Vritti commentary. This is the second one, but I'm going to read the first one also. So, having described the natural glory of Sri Radha Kunda in the previous verse, this 11th verse has been composed with the intention of making steadfast faith in Sri Radha Kunda arise within the hearts of sadhaks. Why has this 11th verse been composed? With what intention?
To steadfast faith in the sadhakas.
Yes. Making steadfast, intention of making steadfast faith in Sri Radha Kunda arise within the hearts of sadhaks. So Srimati Radhika is Sri Krishna's dearmost beloved, and in all respects more exalted than all his other beloveds. In the scriptures, the sages, the Munis, have described Sri Radha Kunda's eminence in the same way. Sri Radha Kunda easily bestows upon one who bathes in its waters that rare praying, which is not only immensely difficult for sadhaks to attain, but also difficult for premi bhaktas like Narad to achieve. So that's what's stated in the verse. Wow. And in reading the 2 commentaries yesterday and part of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada's commentary, it became very clear that what is being referred to as bathing only once, because in the verse itself it says tat premedam sakrit api. So the term sakrit api means only once. Sara snatur avishkaroti. Sara means this pond. Avishkaroti means it bestows. And snatur, upon bathing. Upon one who simply bathes in its waters with great devotion.
Just once.
Huh?
Only once.
Yes, it says that. Sakrit api, only once. Now, obviously, there are many persons, and this was brought up yesterday. I think Tirthapada Prabhu brought up this point about how so many persons go there. And they're bathing in Radhakund and every day and circumambulating. Actually, the majority of them are completely unqualified to be there. But what we're studying in the commentaries here is what is the true understanding of bathing. What does it mean to bathe? And who is doing the bathing? So now, after we just heard of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, I'm rereading the first section of Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada's commentary. So he is again also, as the other two commentators, in his first paragraph, he's describing, like paraphrasing the actual translation of this verse. What is the meaning of the verse? So he's saying, Srimati Radhika is Sri Krishna's dearmost beloved and the crest jewel of those who are dear to him. In the scriptures, devotee sages have described Sri Radha Kunda as being Sri Krishna's foremost beloved object, as dear to him as Srimati Radhika herself. Because yat preshtayar. So preshta means very, very dear. This is the point being made in this shloka, that the pond of Srimati Radhika is as dear, equally, to Sri Krishna as she herself. So, in the scriptures, devotee sages have described Sri Radha Kunda as being Sri Krishna's foremost object, beloved object, as dear to him as Srimati Radhika herself. The topmost love for Bhagavan, Gopi Prem, is exceedingly difficult even for dearly beloved devotees of Bhagavan such as Narada to attain. So, what to speak of how difficult it is for devotees still in the practitioner stage, sadhak bhaktas, to achieve that rare prem. He's giving an exclamation mark there. But very easily, Sri Radha Kunda bestows this prem upon one who bathes in its waters just once. So, that's what the verse is telling. Now, he begins to explain the deeper meaning. He says, Sri Radha Kunda is full of prem, and indeed is actually comprised of waters of nectarian prem. By transcendentally residing, and here in parentheses is the term that he's using in the original Bengali. And he's saying, by transcendentally residing, he uses the term aprakrita vas, transcendentally residing. By transcendentally residing aprakrita vas on the banks of Sri Radha Kunda, and by transcendentally bathing aprakrita snan in its waters, one will obtain the topmost prem. What is meant by aprakrita vas and aprakrita snan? Remaining thoroughly aloof from all desires for material sense enjoyment, one should constantly perform deep meditational worship, that's called manasa bhajan, in strict devotion to Srimati Radhika, strict devotion to Srimati Radhika for the duration of one's life. After shedding this material body, one will attain an eternal spiritual body and be intently engaged in direct eternal service to Srimati Radhika. Only one who bathes in Sri Radha Kunda in this way attains the topmost prem. What do you think? Tall order.
It's not ordinary bathing.
Not an ordinary person.
No.
Not an ordinary person residing, nor bathing. This is the criterion.
So it's ekantik bhajan. It's very high level for someone who's actually qualified to take it.
Yes. And manasa bhajan.
Yes.
And in one's aprakrita deha.
Aprakrita deha.
Yes. Now he goes on. And he says, obtaining such good fortune is exceedingly difficult, even for such exalted premi devotees as Narad. It is extremely difficult, even for the perfected devotees who eternally serve Krishna in the devotional mellows, rasas of servitude, dasya, friendship, sakya, parenthood, vatsalya, to bathe in Sri Radhakunda. What to speak of worldly-minded persons is extremely difficult, even for the perfected devotees who eternally serve Krishna in these devotional rasas, to bathe in Radhakunda. So what to speak of worldly-minded persons? So can we conclude from that the worldly-minded persons are not actually bathing?
Yes.
Yeah. It's not actual bathing. Then yesterday we had, a whole discussion about, but nevertheless, Gurudev brought us, worldly persons, to the banks of Sri Radhakunda and gave us instructions to bathe and so forth. So we had quite a discussion about anugatya. What comes from that? Certainly, you will not immediately attain that prema. Only one who's on that level will attain that prema. Right? Because it's a prakrita snan, a prakrita vas on the banks, using one's entire duration of one's life. Yes. Completely, thoroughly aloof from all desires for material sense enjoyment. Deep meditation and worship, constantly manasa bhajan, in strict devotion to Srimati Radhika for the duration of one's life. This is the criterion. So,
if we were doing that, then if we bathe just once, we should experience praying. But we can bathe 1,000 times and we might still be fully in mundane consciousness.
yeah.
Which means we're definitely not doing that kind of bath.
No, we're not. But then we discussed, what is the value? What is the purpose for going to Radhakund like that? Or for coming to Parikrama,
right,
and going to all these places? Because our vision is still showing us water, land, trees. That's what we can recognize.
Some coating.
Some coating. And that coating, Gurudev said, is cumulative,
right,
over many times in one's life. In Prabhupada's purport, he says one should try to bathe as many times in one's life as one can in Sri Radhakunda.
Wow.
In Prabhupada's purport,
right,
you see. Yeah.
On the morning walk, Gurudev, like I told you, he said, this is Radhakund, this is Shalakund, before they're excavated.
The puddles.
The trees are offering their fruits.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, then later he said, don't think this remembrance of Vrindavan is imagination.
Mm. Gradually
impressions come in the heart,
Yeah.
and as they go deeper and deeper, then your real Atma will come out.
Yes. So, Gadha samskaras. The term samskara we know. That means impression. Gadha, G-A-D with a dot under it, H-A, Gadha, samskara, is what Srila Rupa Goswami is referring to in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu regarding what is required for some jiva to actually attain the stage of bhav, transcendental bhav, avastha. What is necessary for that? And he says, without Gadha means very deep, Gadha. Samskaras, very deep samskaras. It is not possible to attain the stage of bhava. From Gurudev we have learned this. Srila Prabhupada didn't talk about samskaras practically at all. He might mention impressions. But for those who are under the guidance of a Rasik, perfected Mahabhagavat Vaishnava, he's telling the process. And the process is that one will have to attain the necessary samskaras. Okay? He also admitted that various persons have many obstacles that are facing them because of previous life's samskaras that are not favorable, right? He mentioned that. We all experience that to some degree, right? Not only that, but also it describes there, in that same section of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, that when one is approaching the stage of bhav, and that means that someone has already gone through Nishta stage, Ruchi stage, Asakti, and is in the stage of Asakti, right? But Rupa Goswami mentions, he says, in that stage, there is still some remnant left of the effects or the reaction to committing some offense against a great pure Vaishnava. Still, some effects still there. You see. No, it's not such an easy thing. One has to be very determined. Neophyte devotees don't understand this point. They do not understand it. They're not ready yet to fully dedicate, fully surrender and do all that. But by acquiring the necessary samskaras, impressions, now also anarthas are going away. And one is becoming more and more focused and more dedicated and comes to the stage of nishta. And in that stage of nishta, now very fixed. And these attractions and desires for ordinary, very low-grade, mundane, materialistic sense enjoyment, they have diminished. The effect, tada rajas tamo bhava kama lobha adayas, right? Bhagavatam is telling, kama lobha adayas. The effects of raja and tama. So this is the necessary, and it will take time. It is not just an overnight process. No. And one will have to have all the necessary elements to progress. If someone is not ready to do it in this life, then next life have to do it. And if one is not ready in that life, then the next life have to do it. So, when one finds oneself in such association with such opportunity and really understands, now I have to go for it. I don't have time to waste. I could die at any moment. How did I come here? How did I get to this point in my spiritual life with the association of pure Vaishnavas and so forth? But yet, we have some inadequacies that we have to face within ourselves and so forth. That's where the third quality comes. First quality in Upadeshamrita, Utsahan. There must be enthusiasm. Utsaha. Then the second quality, Nishchayad. Firm determination. Completely, full conviction. And then the third quality, Dhairyat. Patience. Patience. These must be there. Tarodapi sahishnuna. Tolerant as a tree. Patient. Forbearing. No one gets to the perfectional stage without this. No one has ever or will ever. This sadhana process is given by Rupa Goswami, by Mahaprabhu, by the Acharyas, by following sincerely then one will gradually come to those stages and become more and more prepared to, as Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj says, self-giving. Self-giving. Giving one's own self fully. So, as I'm mentioning, Rupa Goswami said, there's still some trace of an offense against a great Mahabhagavad Vaishnava. It's mentioned by him. That still has to be eradicated, that trace, because that will prevent one from coming to the stage of bhav. And every one of us has done that in one life or another, right? So we have to face that, and therefore we have to become very, very humble, considering ourselves so low and insignificant, like less than a blade of grass. We have to have that. That's the only positive quality that will enable us to persevere and to go forward, because we're disqualified. And we have to understand that. And we don't even know what's within us. Like when Srila Sridhar Maharaj talks about it, he says, my Lord, I don't know even what is within me. No, but I'm coming to you to try to surrender to you. You know what's there. You know. So, it's not cheap. And the 11th verse and this commentary is making it so clear that that's what we have to do if we want that praying. We will have to reside on the banks of Radhakunda. If we can't do that physically, we'll have to be there internally. Gurudev has said this so many times. But he said, still, you should be there physically. You know, he wouldn't discount that ever. You know? So, finishing this paragraph, what he's telling here, how obtaining such good fortune is exceedingly difficult, even for such exalted premi devotees as Narada.
Wow.
You see? It is extremely difficult even for the perfected devotees who eternally serve Krishna in their rasas, Dasya Sakya Vatsalya, to bathe in Sri Radhakund. So what to speak of worldly-minded persons? So that means real bathing. They cannot. It's very, very difficult for them. Because they know, all the great devotees know the glories of Sri Radhakunda and how that is the place where the eternal pastimes of Radha and Krishna are going on, and one can enter into those pastimes by doing this process of bathing in Radhakund and being bestowed a Gopi Deha, a perfected spiritual form, and then serving Radha and Krishna eternally on the banks of Radhakund. He ends this paragraph by saying, those who bathe there obtain good fortune that extends all the way up to becoming maid servants of Srivarsa Banavi Srimati Radhika. That is our goal. That's why Rupa Goswami gave 3 whole verses about Radhakunda. But it's not cheap, even to understand those verses. Now comes a very beautiful completion of his purport, where he's telling the actual pastime of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Puri and how this Upadeshamrita, these teachings, came from his lotus mouth. He says, Sri Govinda Das was Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's dear servant, always accompanying Mahaprabhu, as if he were his shadow. He served Mahaprabhu with great love. Simultaneously, he would also record in his own words descriptions of Sriman Mahaprabhu's especially significant pastimes. The collection of verses that he wrote became famous by the name of Govinda Kadacha. having heard these verses directly from Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, Sri Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami explained them in his own words in his Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. That's how it's coming to us. Govinda Das, Raghunath Das Goswami, Krishna Das Kaviraj. Through the medium of those verses, light was shed upon Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's transcendental character. The following is a narration from the time when Srimad Mahaprabhu was residing in Jagannath Puri. Here it is. Now we're going to Puri on the banks of the ocean with Gurudev. Mahaprabhu had already fulfilled the objectives for which he descended upon this earth. Now he desired to wind up his pastimes. One day he took his intimate devotees and he went to the shore of the ocean. Seeing the blue ocean, remembrance of Shyam Sundar immediately arose within him. Becoming overwhelmed in devotional ecstasy, bhav, he was oblivious to all else. With great difficulty, his devotees gradually brought him back to external consciousness. At that very time, Sri Gaur Sundar slowly began instructing those devotees. In that assembly, Mahaprabhu's very dear disciple, Sri Rupa Goswami, was also present. Rupa Goswami wrote those instructions down in verse form, and these verses became famous as Sri Upadeshamrita, nectarine instructions. For spiritual practitioners, this Upadeshamrita is like their very lives and a necklace to be worn at all times. A servant of the famous Sri Radharaman deity in Vrindavan, named Radharaman Das Goswami, composed a beautiful commentary entitled Upadesh Prakashika Tika on the 11 verses of Sri Upadeshamrita. After some time, the condition of the residents of this world became critical due to the doctrine of Prem Bhakti having been substantially covered by the frightful influence of the present age of Kali Yuga. Seeing this, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sent his dear eternal devotee, Sri Bhaktivinoda Thakur, to this world. Shri Shri Guru Gauranga Radha Govinda Ji Ki Jai. So after some time, the condition of the residents of this world became critical condition. Due to the doctrine of Prem Bhakti having been substantially covered by the frightful influence of the present age of Kali Yuga. Seeing this, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sent his dear eternal devotee, Sri Bhaktivinoda Thakur, to this world. In simple and comprehensible language, he composed a brief yet essential commentary on the verses of Sri Upadeshamrita. This commentary is famous as Piyusha Varshani Vritti. Sri Gaur Sundar is the personification of Aprakrita Vipralamba Rasa. Everyone can repeat. Aprakrita Vipralamba Rasa. Aprakrita Vipralamba Rasa. Here he's telling, Srila Prabhupada is telling Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, Sri Gaur Sundar is the personification of Aprakrita Vipralamba Rasa, which means the mellow that is constituted of sentiments of divine separation from Sri Krishna. To nourish the rasa of sambhog, which is when the devotee is meeting together with Krishna, he tasted that Vipralamba rasa, and for the benefit of human society, he taught how it can be attained. It is compulsory for sincere sadhaks to accept these instructions, otherwise it will be impossible for them to ever achieve Krishna prema. That's an important statement here. What is he telling? It's compulsory. Right? It is not a question of maybe I will, maybe I won't. No. It's absolutely compulsory for sincere sadhaks to accept these instructions of Upadeshamrita. Otherwise, it will be impossible for them to ever achieve Krishna prema. Which means, until they do accept those instructions, then it will be impossible. Now, he's giving, as he's completing his purport, he's giving a overview of what's going on in the modern times. He says, in modern times, Kali Maharaj, the personification of the present degraded age, has assumed the bogus dress of a devotee of Sri Gaura. What about that? I guess it's not so easy to determine who's a devotee. So he says, sometimes Kali Maharaj in the dress of a devotee of Sri Gaura, sometimes he adopts the name of the imitationist cults, Sahajya cults, such as Aul, Baal, Neda, or Nadi. He mentions 4, but there are 13. Yeah. So, Jati Gosai. So, sometimes he adopts the name of imitationist Sajya cults, such as Aul, Baal, Neda, Nadi. With great intensity, he propagates these false philosophies, as well as other doctrines such as Mayavad and Gaurnagari, which are opposed to the path of bhakti. Aho! Exclamation mark. Just see the influence of Kali Maharaj! Exclamation mark. Who's saying this? Yes. Yes. Just see the influence of Kali Maharaj. Some say, I am Gaur Hari himself. Have we seen that? Yes, we have.
There's someone else calling themselves Mahaprabhu in Vrindavan.
Yeah. No, we've seen it. This is the point. Some are saying, I am Gaur Hari himself.
Yes.
Some declare themselves to be glorious spiritual masters. Some consider themselves to be the creator. And others say that they are Shiva. We heard that the other day. When Gaur Hari Prabhu was telling about his going to that ayahuasca thing, and there were so many persons who were even claiming to be Lord Shiva.
Right.
Yeah. Very enthusiastically, they cheat the human society by propagating their bogus philosophies that they were taught by who?
Other bogus persons.
Kali Maharaj. They were taught by him these bogus philosophies. So, how does Kali Maharaj reciprocate with his devotees? Huh? How does he reciprocate?
He gives them, Kanaka Kamani Pratishta.
He says, being pleased with their preaching, Kali Maharaj blesses them and bestows upon them abundant wealth, Kanaka, women, Kamani, and notoriety, Pratishta. Being bewildered by their propaganda, most people ignore Shuddha Bhakti and Bhagavad Bhajan, and instead they advance along the path of these new depraved philosophies that are based on material enjoyment. They become so intoxicated in this mundane enjoyment that they are completely unaware of just how they are ascending the peak of thorough self-destruction.
Whoa. Ascending the peak of thorough self-destruction.
O faithful devotees, O faithful devotees, don't move in that direction. Become steadfastly situated upon the path of bhakti that was shown by great personalities such as Sri Swarup Damodar, Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, and Sri Narottam Thakur. Yes, become steadfastly situated on the path of bhakti that was shown by these great personalities. This devotional path enables one to relish the pure Krishna prema that was practiced and preached by Sri Gaur Nityananda. Reside in Braj. Reside in Braj and always perform kirtan and smaran of Sri Radha Krishna's Nam, Rupa, Guna, and Leela. The doctrine of Gaur Nagari is a bogus philosophy that is opposed to bhakti. Remain aloof from such bogus philosophies. The embodiments of Prem Bhakti, Sri Vishnu Priya and Sri Lakshmi Priya, as well as the embodiment of the holy Dham, Sri Neela Devi, perpetually serve Sri Gaur Sundar, who is the combined form of Sri Radha Krishna. Knowing this to be true, take shelter of him, and following in the footsteps of the Braja Gopis, day and night render devotional service within the mind. By doing so, even that Prem Seva of Sri Radha Krishna, which is extremely difficult to obtain, will become easily attainable. Sri Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he revealed the holy Dham of Mayapur. There, he established the regular worship of deities, including Sri Gaur Nityananda, Sri Gaur Gadadhar, Sri Gaur Vishnu Priya, and Sri Gaur Lakshmi Priya. Everywhere he preached the holy names of Sri Gaur and Sri Krishna, as well as the doctrine of Shuddha Bhakti. Besides composing many of his own books on Shuddha Bhakti, He translated many ancient devotional scriptures, and he wrote numerous commentaries, essays, and articles. Towards the end of his life, upon seeing the dearth of bhakti in society, he deprived the people by ceasing his attempts to deliver them. On the pretext of old age, he adopted a vow of silence, and he remained immersed in manasa seva, devotional service performed within meditation. Overwhelmed with compassion for the souls suffering in this world, with tearful eyes he looked towards me. And he ordered me to preach the doctrine of Shuddha Bhakti that was revealed by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his eternal devotees. He also instructed me to compose this Anuvriti commentary, illuminating his Piyushavarshini Vritti commentary on Sri Upadeshamrita. Taking the dust of his divine feet upon my head, I have followed his command. But just when I had completed commenting on 8 verses of Sri Upadeshamrita, he departed this world from Swananda Sukata Kunja at Sri Radha Kunda, and he entered into Radha Krishna's eternal pastimes. O Sri Bhaktivinoda Thakur, intimate devotee of Srimati Radhika, on this day of completing my Anuvritti commentary on the verses of Sri Upadeshamrita, this destitute servant of yours offers it into your lotus hands. May you be pleased. All glories unto you. Remembering Sri Gaurachandra, on this 22nd day of the lunar month of Bhadrapad in the year 1914, at Chandrasekhar Bhavan in Mayapur, I have completed this Anuvriti commentary.
Wow. Bhaktivinoda Nishtha. I find it very interesting that his conclusion to those 3 verses of glorifying Radhakund is taking shelter of the Dhara, the mercy of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. It's part of our process.
Yeah, and this is 1914, which is around, just after that time, around 1915, I think it is, that he began to reside there, and he had completed his vow. He had already completed his vow, to chant 1 billion names.
Yes.
Right? And then Panchatattva appeared to him and gave him order. Now you preach. Do not think about men or money. All will be provided. So I think it was 1915 that Param Gurudev came with his 2 aunties who had already received Harinam from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, and they brought him there at the time of Gaur Purnima time, and that's when Vinod Bihari Brahmachari received initiation from him, and also the conversation took place where he was describing and discussing with who was present in front of him that in the future there will be temples, mutts established on each one of the 9 islands of Navadvip Dham. There will be printing press, which is distributing all these transcendental literatures, all the books of Bhaktivinoda Thakur and such. And so he was mentioning like this. Then the auntie of Param Gurudev, she said, oh, Prabhupada, you are telling that all of these things will take place, but yet we don't even have enough devotees to ring the bell during the arti. So how will this take place, she asked. Then he looked at the young Vinod Bihari, who was, I think, 16, something like
16,
that, 17.
at the time.
Yeah. And he said, Vinod will do all. He told them. Yes. So then the preaching mission began, and everyone was sent. All these great personalities sent by Mahaprabhu to assist this great preaching mission, the Gaudiya Math. And then he went to Calcutta and began preaching there. Srila Sridhar Maharaj came at that time and saw him, and so many others. And gradually, the mission began to expand, and he established the headquarters just near to the Yogpit, Chandrasekhar Bhavan, where he had completed his vow over a period of 10 years of chanting 1 billion names. Completed his vow. And that became Sri Chaitanya Mat. Akaramat Raj. We say that every time in our Jayadvani. Sri Chaitanya, Akaramat Raj, Sri Chaitanya Mat. That is the mission, the Gaudiya Mat mission. That very place in the Dham, and the deities of Gandharvika Giridhari were installed by Prabhupada there in that small temple. And on all four corners was the deities of the 4 Vaishnava Acharyas. And the Kirtan hall was named, what was it named? Gurudev brought us there and told us this. Then he ordered everyone, do heavy Kirtan. And then he was directing them, to very vigorously go back and forth and chant and dance, right? And that Kirtan hall has the name of, I can't remember the term, but it has to do with completely uprooting all anarthas in the heart in that Kirtan hall, right? And then outside of there, Srila Gaura Das Babaji Maharaj Samadhi, and then the house where Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur lived is there, and the jackfruit tree.
I'm remembering some shoes of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada. Don't you remember the shoes? You get to touch your head to them.
On one side.
There, yeah, just there on the side at the one Samadhi, I think of.
Not the Samadhi.
Here.
No, it's in the house.
Okay.
His Bhajan Kutir, where just in front of his house is where he had the vision of Radha Kunda and Shama Kunda. And those two ponds are there, and they are Radha Kunda and Shama Kunda.
Right.
And they even constructed a Govardhan hill there, just in front of the Radha Kunda. Like, I think that these were the Shilas taken directly from Govardhan. They're large Shilas. I'm not sure if they're directly from Govardhan or they just used rocks like that. But that's there. And then, of course, the Samadhi of Srila Prabhupada. Yeah. I remember the first time coming on the bus from the airport after our 36-hour, I think you were on that flight, right? In 1975, the first time that we went to India. And we got picked up at the airport by all these buses. There was a few hundred devotees on that plane.
Or it's only devotees on the plane, right?
No, there was a few non-devotees, but not many. You know, they were like up in the, so we had chartered the plane with a whole section of the plane. Yeah, I think by the time we got to India, all those other people were not even on the plane. They got off along the way. Because the plane actually left from New York, then it went to London, landed there, then I think it went to Germany and landed there.
Some of the German devotees coming
Yeah, then the German devotees were coming on, the British devotees were coming on the plane.
Is kirtan on the plane?
Kirtan, oh
Incense.
yes. I don't know about incense.
That time they allowed smoking.
But they allowed smoking, that's true. Yeah. But I'll tell you one thing that happened on the plane is that the airline pilot of the plane gave an announcement to us when we were doing kirtan and devotees were standing in the aisles and they were like jumping up and down and dancing. He says, please, please, everybody sit down. You're making the plane unsteady. They had also packed for us our prasadam bags, remember?
Nice.
For the whole flight.
Wow.
We got a big prasadam bag. But it was long flight. It took like, what, 30 hours just going from one place then the next, and they had to refuel along the way. I think we got off in the Middle East in one country, and it was all dark and eerie, and we're looking through the window waiting for the plane to be...
Abu Dhabi?
Yeah, no, it's some other place. And then finally we landed in Bombay on our way to Calcutta. Right? So most of the devotees had not been to India yet. The majority, vast majority of the devotees, their first time. So when we landed in Calcutta, and I think this was one of the first jumbo jets that actually landed in Calcutta airport, because there were newspaper people and they were taking photos and so forth. And when we got off the plane onto the tarmac, what did we do? We fell on the tarmac, full dandavat pranams, understanding that we're in the holy birthplace of Srila Prabhupada in Calcutta,
Right.
and we're in India,
India.
you know. So then we all came where the luggage was coming and got our luggages and everything.
It's a Dum-Dum International Airport.
Yeah. It wasn't big like it is now.
No, it was just
quite small.
on the room.
Yeah. And so then there were devotees who were already waiting there with buses that they had hired. Enough buses to carry all the devotees back to Mayapur.
Wow.
So after that long flight and everything, we boarded the buses and now we're in India for the first time. And like, you know, we were coming from New York, which was middle of the winter. It was like end of February or something, you know, there's still snow and this and that. And now we're in a tropical place with coconut trees, banana trees, it's all tropical and green, like the paintings that we saw in the Chaitanya Charitamrita,
right?
You know? So we were like looking out the windows and, you know, it's rumbling and we're tired, we're quite tired, and a lot of devotees are just nodding off, you know. So after a few hours, we arrived in Mayapur, probably like 4 hours maybe, with the roads in those days. And then the devotees who were guiding us, who were living in Mayapur, and they were on each one of the buses. So the devotees started kirtan with kartals and everything. They said, everybody, wake up, you know. Now we're coming into Mayapur. And the plan was not to stop at these places along the road. There's only one road, Bhaktisiddhanta Road, you know, that goes from the birthplace, from Krishna Nagar all the way down to the Ghat.
Yes.
You know? Same thing now, you know. So as we were approaching, then everybody was up and we're looking, and there in the distance comes like a dome-shaped, you know, place, and then the devotee announces to us, everybody, this is the samadhi of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and we like, and we're just rolling by. They kind of slowed the bus down a little bit, but they didn't stop. And then we go a little bit distance, and then he says, now, look here on the left side. This is the house where Mahaprabhu had his nightly kirtan, Srivas Angan, the house of Srivas Thakur. And then, very soon, now, this is the temple of Gauranga Mahaprabhu, built on the birthplace of Mahaprabhu, you know, and we're going by, slowed down very much, but we didn't get off then, right? And now, he said, now everybody look off into the distance. And at that time, there were nothing but rice fields, maybe a few mud huts, thatched roof huts. That's about it at that time. And way off in the distance, across the fields, he said, you see that building way off in the distance? That's Prabhupada's Mayapur Chandrodaya Mandir. And we're all like, Jai Prabhupada, Prabhupada. So we get finally down the road all the way to the front gate, which is the same exact front gate, right? That they had back when they started building. And we get off the buses with our luggage, we go through the gates, and there, I think Bhavananda was there at the time.
Was sitting down.
Yes, and there was a huge pile of dabs, green coconuts. Most of us had never had a green coconut in our life.
Sure.
And so, you know, we were thirsty and long journey, and we're just guzzling these green coconuts. And then they showed us, okay, here's your rooms. And you know what was there for our rooms?
Empty.
Huh?
Empty cement.
Yeah, and practically wet cement. Of all those rooms that are in the front side that are now shops and everything.
Right.
So those were just newly constructed. And at the end of the row of rooms, there was a pavilion that had been newly constructed also for the ISKCON food relief that was going on there in Mayapur. And actually, a lot of them were Vaishnavas had fled across the border from Bangladesh, and you know. So we put our luggages down, and didn't even have locks and stuff yet in those days, and I think the doors didn't even lock, you know. So then we were told, go down to the pavilion, and we entered into the pavilion, and everybody took their seats. They had those, just like they have now in Mayapur for distributing mass to large amounts of people. They had an upraised platform, cement platform that you sit, and then they come down and they serve. And you know, it's a little bit elevated. So we all sat down, and for the first time in our life, we saw leaf plates. And also clay cups, right? And so they began to serve prasadam. And there were some elderly Gaudiya Math devotees who were there. I don't know at all who they were, but they began to sing Sharira Vidya Jal Jyotendriya Tahikal, and we're all responding like, you know, 500 devotees. And they went through the whole song. Jive Phele Vishaya Sagare. And then, after they finished the song, they began singing various refrains, which we never heard before. Yes, like that. But then, they sang the next song. Ekadina Shanti Puri. Yeah. So anyway, when they came to the end of it, then they chanted, you know, Sri Krishna Chaitanya and the Maha Mantra, and everyone just exploded with the Maha Mantra, you know. And now we started to take prasadam. And then we went to our rooms and rested, and after 2-3 hours of resting, then it was time to go to the Ganga for the first time. The Ganga. And we went across the fields. And at that time, the Ganga was not so far away. The fields were all crumbly, dried earth, you know. And then we came to the bank of the Ganga, and it's just serene. no sounds of any vehicles, so calm.
At that time, the boats didn't have motors.
No, none of the
It's
boats.
all sticks.
They were all sticks and all paddles, you know. And so I remember swimming a little ways out into the Ganga, and I'm just like feeling incredible. And then suddenly a rowboat with two old sadhu-looking men in the boat. They came, you know, slowly floating by, and they looked at me, and I looked at them, and they said, Haribol, Haribol, Gaur Haribol, Gaur Haribol. And I was like blown away. Yeah. And after that, after bathing, we went back to our rooms, got ready, put on tilak, and went to the evening artik and the temple room. By the time I got there, the temple room was literally exploding. All the leaders were there at that time, and especially the Yashodanandan and Guru Kripa, and then they were beating the drums, and there were so many, and you know, like everybody's like jumping out of their skins, and they're going back and forth, you know, a few hundred devotees, and we're finally in the Dham, we're in Mayapur Dham, you know.
Is that when those photos were taken? When it was hundreds and hundreds or thousands of devotees?
Not thousands.
But doing that big, parikrama.
Oh, on the roads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was that time.
Was that time, and also the next year, 1976 also, they also took.
The German
photos.
devotees were notoriously wild.
Yes.
In Kirtan.
Notoriously wild.
When it comes to do this.
Yeah, yeah. And Prabhupada arrived the next morning.
Wow.
From Calcutta in his car, and we're on the road outside the gate to greet Prabhupada. Then Prabhupada came, and we all surrounded the car, and we're all chanting Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Then the car slowly moved up the road from the main gate. Now there's that big temple in the middle, but at that time there was nothing, just a dirt road practically. And we went up to the temple. Prabhupada got out of the car and went into the temple and paid his obeisances and circumambulated the deities that first time, which he did every single day after that, you know. I actually have a photo somebody sent me of I'm in one of those photos. Indradumna is there, and I think Brahmananda Gargamuni. There's a whole bunch, and we're all like squeezed together, and Prabhupada's ringing the bell. And we went wild. Do you remember that?
I don't remember the details.
Yeah. But you remember how Prabhupada rang the bell and we go around. So that's the little that was stimulated by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and his establishing Sri Chaitanya Mat and all of that. But how fortunate we are. Right, Vyala Prabhu?
Yeah.
He spent so much time in India with Prabhupada, you know, in the early years. So, time to end. And tomorrow is Ekadashi, Titi. Yes?
And disappearance of Srila Gaurkishore Babaji Maharaj.
Right.
Bhishma Panchak,
Bhishma
first day.
Panchak, right?
And one other. Bhakti Dayita Madhav Maharaj.
Oh, yes. Okay.
It's a big day.
We should start the program earlier. We should start the program earlier.
All of them. It's a
Wow.
lot.
Yeah. Okay. One last question. Bhishma Panchak is Panchak, means 5 days.
Yes.
Begins from Ekadasi, Dvadashi,
Yes.
Trayodasi,
Yes.
Chaturdashi. So then Purnima. Purnima is included. That's the day that we break the fasts.
It's also the day that is said that the day, 5 days leading up till Bhishma's departure.
Right. Okay.
Our Gurudev and Parama Gurudev didn't put too much emphasis on the Bhishma Panchak. They wanted us to follow the full month of Kartik and the full 4 months of Chaturmas.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, Gurudev had a similar stance regarding Bhaimi Ekadasi, Bhima, for
Bhima
Ekadasi for
yeah.
Bhima, which, you know, a lot of the ISKCON devotees got into this understanding that, hey, you know, if you miss Ekadasi,
Just follow that.
Oh, you just got to follow that one day Ekadasi and do the full Nirjal, and then you get the benefit of all the Ekadasis. Gurudev said, no. No.
Gurudev said all the Kadashis are near Jal. Only for Bhima, he had that special concession.
Right.
It's only for him. Krishna
Yes.
didn't give it for everyone.
Yeah.
He said from like 4 to 85, you all have to follow near Jal every time. We're like, no.
85 is the cutoff point.
No, something like, I don't know, something 8 to 80 or something like
I'm
that.
not going to be around in that.
Almost there.
Yeah, you're getting close. Yeah, you're getting close.
Gurudev followed Nirjal until he was 85 at least.
Yeah.
Every time Nirjal Ekadashi.
So that means even when he was traveling around the world, I didn't know that. I didn't hear that he was doing Ekadasi.
I don't know if he was doing it when he was traveling.
Nirjal. I don't think so.
But most of the Ekadashis, maybe before
Yeah.
that time, he did.
Well, he was 75 when he started traveling.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't even know if I'm gonna make it that.
Mhm.
75 would probably be gone way before then.
No one knows.
My God.
Braj is gonna be 100.
He may.
I make it to
He has
tomorrow.
longevity genes. He has the genes.
Yes, he must.
All right. Gaur Premanande. Shri Upadesham Ritam ki jai. Srila Rupa Goswami Pada ki jai. Shri Rupa Goswami's transcendental literatures ki jai. Shri Rupa Nuga Guru Varga ki jai. Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Nita Gaur Premanande. Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna
Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Jaya Radha Govinda Radha Govinda Radhe
Radha Govinda Radha Govinda Radhe
Radha Vinodi Hari Radha Vinodi Hari Radhe
Jaya Radha Vinodi Hari Radha Vinodi Hari Radhe
Jaya Radhe Jaya Krishna Jaya Radhe Jaya Krishna
Jaya Radhe Jaya Krishna Jaya Radhe
Jaya Radhe Jaya Krishna Sachinandan Jaya Gaura Hari, Sachinandan Jaya Gaura Hari,
Jaya Sachinandan Jaya Gaura Hari, Sachinandan Jaya Gaura Hari.
Gaura He, Gaura He, Gaura He, Gaura He.
Gaura He, Gaura He,
Nitai He, Nitai He, Nitai He, Nitai He.
Nitai He, Nitai He, Nitai He, Nitai He.
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol.
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol.
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Gaura Hari Bol.
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol.
Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Shri Rupanuga Guru Varga ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Samagata Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanandi
Hari Hari Bol.
Vansha Kalpatarubhascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha.